Our next presenter is Holly Prin, and Alan Wentworth is going to introduce her. So thank you, Alan.
I am very pleased to announce the next speaker, Holly. She is a dietitian, a registered dietitian, and a wellness coach. She's been a dietitian since 2009. She graduated from Colorado State University. She has lots of experience with nutrition across the spectrum, from critical care, and she works closely with our pulmonary rehab group. I think she has a lot of good advice to offer. If you guys have questions during this, please write your questions down on the note cards in the center of your table, and we'll come around and pick them up and give them to Holly for her to answer your questions, all right? So please give a very warm round of applause for Holly.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me here to speak to you guys today on nutrition. Thank you for having me here to speak to you on nutrition. No? Okay, I got to be really close then. Okay. So my talk for you guys today is on nutrition and pulmonary health. I want to start by talking about an overall healthy diet, and that's because for most of your lives, people with pulmonary disease have similar nutrition needs to people without pulmonary disease. During that time, we just want you to follow an overall healthy diet. The reason that a healthy diet is important for people with COPD or with other pulmonary conditions is that it can help protect lung function, and it gives you the energy that you need and the muscle tone you need for breathing. A healthy diet can also help prevent lung infections. On the other hand, a poor diet can cause problems for people with lung disease, and it can also increase your chances of developing other diseases like hypertension, diabetes, and heart disease. And a healthy diet, so I've got COPD written up there a lot, but it's important for other pulmonary conditions too. So a Mediterranean diet is recommended for people with asthma, and for pulmonary fibrosis, they recommend kind of an overall healthy diet, so vegetables, fruit, whole grains, lean meats, and low-fat dairy products as well. So I want to talk to you about what a healthy diet looks like. There we go. So this is my kind of version of a healthy plate. So this is the way I want people to plan most of their meals. So you'll see the basis of that plate is going to be your non-starchy vegetables. So those are a really key component of your meal. Half your plate should be non-starchy veggies. It also includes a source of protein. So that's going to be your chicken, your fish, your eggs, lean meats, beans, and nuts. We do want you to have those be about palm-sized portions. The exception to that is going to be nuts, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But getting enough protein and making sure protein is on all of your plates is important because protein can help produce antibodies that fight lung infections. The other quarter of your plate you can fill with a starchy veggie or a whole grain. And we'll talk about kind of whole grains versus refined grains in a moment. And then if you'd like, you can add a serving of fruits and a serving of dairy to kind of round out your plate and plan a healthy meal. So I'm going to go over some of the components of kind of an overall healthy diet a little bit more in depth. So we already talked about veggies. So why are veggies so important? They give you fiber, they give you a lot of vitamins and minerals, and sorry, I'm turning the page. So you want to consume at least 4 servings of non-starchy veggies every day. And a serving would be about a cup portion size if it's raw, or a half cup if it's cooked. And what I recommend is kind of choosing a variety of vegetables and choosing a variety of different colored fruits and vegetables, because when you're choosing that variety of colors, each of those colors can kind of represent different nutrients that are in the food. So rather than choosing, just broccoli as your only vegetable, by getting all sorts of colorful vegetables, you make sure you're meeting all of your nutrition needs. And then also, I know some guidelines out there say make half your plate fruits and vegetables. I really think making veggies a bigger portion than fruits is key. Vegetables are low glycemic index, so they don't spike blood sugar in the same way that fruit does. So choosing plenty of vegetables, still having fruit on your plate, but choosing plenty of vegetables is important. So like I said, fruit's still an important part of the diet. 3 or more servings each day. The exception to that is if you have diabetes, I would say probably stick to 3 servings a day, not more than that. Since fruit does have naturally occurring sugars, it's still healthy, but you can overdo it if you have issues with prediabetes or diabetes. Serving of fruit is about the size of a baseball or a tennis ball. So I think some people get worried about, well, I've been told not to eat grapes. Grapes are fine, it's just some people, when they choose some of those foods, it's easier to eat bigger portions. So keep your portion size appropriate when you're having those. And then when you can choose in-season fruits and vegetables, this helps make sure that they have kind of the best amount of nutrition in them. If you can't choose in-season, frozen is also an awesome option, especially if you're kind of on a budget or anything like that. That can really help so that you just portion out what you need and can freeze the rest. And frozen veggies are kind of picked and frozen at the peak of ripeness. And then usually, so double check the label, but usually they don't have added salt or other stuff added if it's just the plain frozen vegetable. With fruits, I also do recommend choosing just actual whole fruit and not fruit juice and not dried fruit for an overall healthy diet. Dried fruit can sometimes have added sugars or added oils, and fruit juice, it's really easy to kind of overdo it on. Fruit juice, a serving is about a half cup, and it's really easy if you pour yourself a glass of fruit juice to end up with 4 or 5 servings of fruit juice all at once. The other thing I would watch out for with fruit is with canned fruit. Some of them are canned in syrups or heavy syrup, light syrup, so it can add a lot of extra sugar. So that's why I recommend fresh fruit or frozen fruit. So whole grains is another important piece of a healthy diet. We recommend 4 or more servings of whole grains each day, and whole grains is really key. So in nature, the grain has kind of the outer fibrous part, then a kind of middle starchy part, and then the germ, which is like vitamins and minerals and that sort of thing. When you eat refined grains, so white rice, white bread, white pasta, you're not getting that outer fibrous part. You're basically just getting the kind of starchy middle part. So that's why we want the whole grain. That's the beneficial part of nutrition. When you get just the starchy part, you're just getting starch. You're not getting a lot of vitamins and minerals and fiber. So beans and legumes are also an important part of a healthy diet. We recommend getting 3 servings of these each week, and a serving size would be a half cup of cooked beans and legumes. And beans and legumes are great. They're high in fiber, and they also can make a great alternate to meat if you're cutting down on meat products as well. Nuts and seeds, so I told you I'd talk about portion size for these. So they're definitely healthy. I think some people get the idea that, oh, I should be avoiding these because they're high calorie foods. They are high calorie foods. They're high in fat, but they're high in healthy types of fat. So you definitely want to include them as part of a healthy diet. But portion size for these should be about golf ball size. So I know some people tend to like, okay, I've got the jar of nuts and I'm going to grab a whole big handful. Keep them in portion. The other thing to keep in mind when you're choosing nuts is try for unsalted, just the plain stuff. A lot of them, the honey roasted or candy coated or stuff like that gets more into the realm of junk food than health food. So fish and shellfish is the last component of a healthy diet that I want to talk about. Choosing fish or shellfish 2 or 3 times a week is what we recommend. Big thing that benefits you from fish and shellfish is the omega-3s, so choosing fatty fish, so salmon, halibut, sardines, tuna are some good options. One thing I've recommended, so if some people hate tuna sandwiches, some people are just fine with them, but if you're normally a deli meat sandwich kind of person, swapping one up a week for a tuna sandwich can help you cut out processed meat and also get a serving of fish in. So that's a kind of an easy way to do it if you like tuna sandwiches. So that's the kind of what I want to talk about as far as overall healthy diet. So if you're not having issues with being overweight or underweight or maintaining your weight, that's kind of what I recommend following. I want to go over kind of how to determine if your weight is a healthy weight or if you're underweight or overweight so that you know, okay, maybe I need to adjust things a little bit from just that overall healthy diet. So these are some calculations, and I'm going to go through each of them so you can kind of figure out for yourself if you're at a healthy weight or if you need to work on weight loss or weight gain. So for men, we give you 106 pounds for the first 5 feet and then 6 pounds per inch for every inch over 5 feet. You do get plus or minus 10% from that, so if you're 10% above or below, that's fine. I would say, though, with pulmonary disease, I wouldn't want you to drop too much below even that ideal number. So I'll give you the range, but we want to be cautious if you're losing weight. We want to avoid that. So if you're 5'11", you'd get 106 pounds for those first 5 feet, and then 6 pounds per inch for those 11 inches. So you'd get 106 pounds plus 66 pounds. So your ideal weight would be 172 pounds, but you'd get a range with that 10% above or below. So 155 to 189 would be kind of a good range for you. For women, we unfortunately get a little bit less per inch and for those first 5 feet. So 100 pounds for the first 5 feet, and then 5 pounds per inch for every inch over 5 feet. So if you're 5'5", you get 100 pounds for those first 5 feet, and then 25 pounds for those extra 5 inches over 5 feet. So an ideal weight would be about 125, so a range of about 113 to 138. Again, with pulmonary disease, I'd try to avoid falling below just that ideal number, but that 10% above would be fine. So I want to talk about kind of what to do if you're overweight or what to do if you are underweight or struggling to maintain your weight at a healthy weight. So the reason that we don't want, that we try to avoid being overweight for pulmonary disease is that being overweight can actually worsen pulmonary symptoms. So it can make it more difficult for you to expand your chest and breathe. People who are overweight or obese also have reduced lung volume and more breathing struggles. And part of this is that fat in the midsection can push up against your diaphragm and make it harder for it to expand. We also know that carrying extra weight increases your oxygen demand. So not only is it harder for you to breathe, but you actually have higher demand for oxygen. Similarly to following an unhealthy diet, being overweight can increase your risks for other diseases, so diabetes, hypertension, cardiac disease. And then in early stage COPD, overweight or obesity can increase inflammation. So those are kind of some reasons to avoid being overweight or work on your weight if you need to. They've also known that for people with asthma who are carrying extra weight, just losing some weight can help improve their symptoms. So I do want to clarify, when I talk about weight loss, I want people to do any weight loss plan they're doing in a sustainable way. If it's not something you can keep up, it's probably not something you should start. So the kind of fad diets out there, I steer people away from and just go to an overall healthy diet, kind of watching portion sizes, that sort of thing. We don't want you to lose more than 1 to 2 pounds a week, which I think is a frustrating number for some people because there's diets out there that are claiming you can lose 10 pounds in 2 days or things like that. That's not actually healthy. So we want to have a slow, controlled weight loss if you are losing weight and if you do need to lose weight, because when you do lose weight, you lose both fat mass and lean muscle mass as well. And we want to minimize that lean muscle mass loss. So the key that I recommend for weight loss is cutting calories a little bit, maybe watching portion sizes, watching what you're eating, but also staying active. And I think he talked about that in the last presentation as well, as staying active is really key. It's key in weight loss because it helps you maintain that lean body mass as you're healthfully losing weight. So, a few tips for you as far as working on trying to lose weight. First thing is pay attention to your body. I think a lot of us don't always know those hunger cues or fullness cues. So start paying attention to your body. Start eating when you're hungry. Stop eating when you're full, trying to avoid overeating. Avoid eating for reasons other than hunger. This is a big one that I know a lot of people do. You get bored, you have a snack. You're lonely, you have a snack. You get tired, well, have something to give you some energy. I think trying to meet your actual needs. So if you're lonely, call a friend. If you're tired, take a nap. Meet what your need is instead of trying to kind of fill that with food. Make half your plate vegetables, and I think we talked about that a little bit, but with trying to lose weight, it's really key to make half your plate vegetables because vegetables are low in calories and high in fiber. And what that fiber does is it slows down digestion a little bit, so you feel more full with less calories. So I think for people that try to lose weight that don't add the veggies, it's tough because they end up feeling really hungry. So the veggies can kind of help fill your plate, help it make it look like you have a big meal, and fill you up more. Cut back on sugar. So I didn't say that on my little plate drawing that I showed you guys, but sugar's not on there. Sugar is not a healthy component of the diet, and we are all eating, not necessarily each of you, but most people are eating way too much. I think the average American's getting about 22 teaspoons of sugar per day, and the limits are closer to 6 to 9 teaspoons, and it's in a lot of foods hidden in there. So watching out for sugar. Keep all food in the kitchen. So try not to eat in front of the TV, try not to eat in the car. Those are times when you tend to either overeat or not really feel satisfied with what you're eating because you're not actually paying attention to it. Plan meals and snack options ahead of time. I think planning is one of the key things to following a healthy diet, whether it's overall healthy, whether it's working on weight loss or weight gain. If you don't plan options, you're kind of at the liberty of whatever's around you when you get hungry. So planning can help make sure you're on track. Use smaller plates, bowls, glasses, serving spoons. You can, I think if you put less food on a giant plate, you're going to feel a little bit more deprived than if you use a smaller plate and just portion out what you want. Eat slowly and mindfully. There's a whole movement now going on around mindful eating, so that if you're paying attention to your food and you're really truly enjoying your food, you can eat less and still feel satisfied. If you haven't done it, there's some cool online exercises for mindful eating where you do a raisin or a piece of chocolate, and it can help you practice kind of using all your senses when you eat. Try fruit for dessert. So instead of cake or pie or other sweets, try fruit for dessert. If that sounds terrible to you, try fruit for part of your dessert. I had one guy once who was eating 2 giant scoops of ice cream, and we talked about it, and he was willing to do a piece of fruit or some berries and then 1 scoop of ice cream. So even some of those small changes can be helpful. And then drink plenty of water. So that can help. Sometimes people might be thirsty but feeling more hungry. The other thing is if you're drinking water at meal times, okay, can you hear me again? Okay. Where did I stop? Oh goodness. Ice cream for dessert is where I stopped. Okay. Fruit and ice cream. That's not too far back. I thought it might have been slides back. So I had a guy who was eating 2 big things of ice cream, and he was able to cut down to, it was still satisfying to have kind of 1 portion of that be fruit and 1 portion of that be ice cream. Drink plenty of water. So water can help you feel more full, especially if you're drinking water at mealtime. So you'll hear the exact opposite recommendation for people trying to gain weight. Okay, so that's kind of what to do or why we would want to work on weight if you're overweight and how to start going about doing that. If you're underweight, reason that we get concerned about that. So being underweight is concerning. Unplanned weight loss affects about 40 to 70% of people with COPD. Just that extra work of breathing can burn 400 or even more than that calories per day. So it takes more effort just to breathe. It burns more calories. If you have a lung disease and you're losing weight, as we talked about before, you're losing both fat and lean body tissue, and that can weaken your breathing muscles as well as other muscles. So we don't want to do that because that can make breathing more difficult. COPD symptoms can also interfere with healthy meals. So shortness of breath, fatigue, depression can interfere with just eating those regular healthy meals. And this can often result in kind of a vicious cycle. So you don't have too much of an appetite, so you don't eat very much, or you're skipping meals. Then you lose some weight. It weakens your respiratory muscles. You feel even worse. You eat even worse. So trying to break that cycle and make sure that we're maintaining your weight if you're at a good weight or if you're underweight. Poor nutrition, so we really get worried about this because poor nutrition can weaken those respiratory muscles, it can decrease exercise tolerance, and it can affect your lung volume and diaphragmatic muscle mass as well. And one time in particular when I tend to get really worried or when I see people dropping a lot of weight is during exacerbations or during illnesses. So I think that's a time when kind of the last thing on your mind is, hey, I need to get a good meal in. But those are really important times to remember to get some calories in. So if you're having an exacerbation or if you're sick, still try and get in calories where you can. So even Boost or Ensure, those sort of things can be really helpful if having a meal or making a meal doesn't work for you at that point. So some tips for gaining weight or preventing weight loss. So choosing small, frequent meals, not waiting until you're hungry to eat. So if you're forgetting to eat or you don't have much of an appetite, set a timer, use the alarm on your phone, do things to cue yourself, hey, I might not be hungry, but if I'm not, if you're sick to your stomach, that's a different story. But if you're able to eat something, having something small at that point. Skipping meals has been associated with increased risk for malnutrition. So try to avoid skipping meals at all costs. Adding in snacks can also get you some extra calories too. I think one of the times when this tends to be an issue is when people are going from one appointment to another. So if you are busy throughout the day or you've got appointments, remember to bring snacks or food. That's when things like trail mix or nuts or piece of fruit or even like protein bars can be a good option to take with you. Use smaller plates. So if bigger plates are overwhelming, give yourself a smaller plate. If you're eating more often throughout the day, you can eat smaller amounts each time you are eating. Vary the colors and textures of meals. So this isn't necessarily going to help you from a calorie standpoint, but if the meal is more appetizing, you might be more willing to eat a little bit more. So if you think about a meal of like chicken and white rice and cauliflower, might not be as appetizing as something like salmon with brown rice and broccoli that's got a bunch of colors and different textures on it. Make mealtime as pleasant as possible. So having music, keeping the conversation on pleasant topics. If you're already stressed out about eating, this might not be the time to talk about finances or other more stressful topics. If it's difficult to breathe and chew foods adequately, think about using ground meats or chopped meats or soft cooked foods. Those can be kind of helpful ways to help make it a little easier to eat. And then, as I said, kind of opposite of trying to lose weight, we want you to avoid drinking water at meal times. If you're already feeling full and then you fill yourself up with water, other low-calorie fluids, you won't be able to eat as much. So space those fluids between your meal times. And then always keep in mind, you can see a dietitian to help you if these kind of recommendations aren't enough and you're still struggling, to help make more individualized recommendations. So I know at University of Colorado, I'm in the pulm rehab. I think a lot of other pulm rehab programs also have a dietitian. If you're not in a pulmonary rehab program, there's outpatient dietitians out there. So seek help if you need it. If you're struggling, don't wait until you've lost more weight. So here is a list of some high-calorie additions. So if you are losing weight unintentionally, if you're underweight, these are some things to add into your meals. So the ones on the right-hand, that's right-hand side for you guys, sorry. On the right-hand side are kind of the healthier ones. So these are ones that, kind of go for it on these. So add those in. Whenever you have a meal or a snack, be thinking, hey, is there a way that I can throw one of these foods on there to bump the calories, bump the protein? So nuts, they make a good on-the-go snack. You can put them in hot cereals, or you can top salads with them. Nut butters, a lot of people I know have fruit as a snack. If you throw some peanut butter or almond butter or something like that on there, you can bump the calories really significantly. If you're cooking, using extra oil in your cooking or drizzling the food with a little bit of extra oil after you plate the food. Adding seeds, so sunflower seeds on salads. There's sunflower butter out there now. Topping your meal with sesame seeds, things like that can be helpful. Avocado and guacamole, so if you're having Mexican food or if you're having eggs or a salad, you can throw some avocado with that. Dried fruit and raisins, so I think I said to avoid those in the healthy eating, but when you are trying to gain weight, this is a great time. Those are really high calorie, they're calorie dense foods. So mixing them with trail mix, throwing them into hot cereal, things like that can be helpful. Pesto, so pesto's Parmesan cheese and pine nuts and olive oil and basil, so that's kind of a good topping. That's high calorie if you want to put it on fish or on pasta or anything like that. Muesli you can add into cereal or on top of cereal. Yogurt, I do recommend the Greek kind of yogurt for extra protein, so that can be a good way to get some extra protein in, or as a snack. And then wheat germ you can add into smoothies or into hot cereal or even regular cereal. So if you can't maintain your weight or regain the weight you've lost using those foods, that's when I say go for it on the other side. So those are the ones that we think of as being a little less healthy, but if you need to gain the weight or you need to keep the weight on, that's the time to go for all these foods that normally dietitians are going, no, don't eat that. So honey, sugar, butter, cheese, sour cream, all of those foods you can go for it if you're losing weight and we need to keep the weight on. I do have kind of at the bottom on that side, so protein bars, Ensure drinks, instant breakfast drinks, other nutrition supplement drinks. Those can be really good if you're trying to gain or maintain your weight, is to choose those because that's kind of what they're meant for. Another thing to add is sometimes having one of those nutrition supplement drinks before bed or after dinner can be good because then it doesn't fill you up too much for your next meal. So I think snacks are great if you can still get your meals. If you're struggling and you added a snack but then you're less hungry at your next meal, try adding that snack after dinner so it doesn't affect your appetite. Okay. This next one is ways to add some protein. So using milk instead of water when you can. When you're making soups or hot cereals or cocoa, use milk. You can use the full fat kind if you're really trying to gain weight. Mix dry milk powder into regular milk so that way you can kind of call it super milk, so it's even higher calorie than regular milk. You can use that for kind of all the same stuff you would use regular milk for, soups and cereals and that sort of thing. Add diced or ground meat to soups or casseroles. Grated cheese, you can throw on just about anything, so veggies, soups, sauces. Nut butter, put that on breads, put it on fruit, put it on celery. Add cooked cubed shrimp, canned tuna or salmon, crab meat, diced ham, sliced boiled eggs. You can put that into sauces, serve it over rice or noodles, or just think about ways you can add those to the food you're already eating. Choose dessert recipes with eggs, so custards or sponge cake or angel food cake that would have the eggs for extra protein. And then protein powder is a great addition as well. So you can put that into smoothies, you can put that into, mix it into kind of milkshakes. You can also get unflavored, so I think a lot of the ones out there are vanilla or chocolate. If you get the unflavored, you can actually mix it into mashed potatoes too. So I know with pulmonary disease, a lot of people have difficulty with shortness of breath at mealtimes, so I've got a few kind of ideas or tips as to how to help that. So rest before meals and relax during your meals. The one thing I don't recommend, especially if you have reflux, is laying down after your meals. That can actually worsen reflux symptoms, but try and relax during your meals. Use good posture at mealtimes. So sit up straight. Actually, this one's probably not good posture for what your grandma would say, but rest your elbows on the table, have your feet on the floor. Choose soft, easy to chew foods. So again, if you need to, ground meats or finely chopped meats, soft cooked foods. Ask your healthcare team. You may be able to increase your oxygen rate at meals, which could help with that shortness of breath. And then think about, again, those smaller, more frequent meals. That can be helpful so you don't have to eat quite the same quantity. It's not as filling. It doesn't restrict your breathing as much. And then eat slowly and chew your food well. We do want to prevent swallowing a lot of air since that can cause bloating. So here's some tips to fight fatigue. So again, I think I've said this a few times, but those regular small meals, but eating more often can kind of help you feel more energized, fight off fatigue. Plan meals in advance. Again, I have to say planning meals is one of the key pieces to being successful with any sort of nutrition change you're trying to work on. That way you're not trying to just come up with something quick when you get hungry. Don't go more than 4 hours without eating something. And I would say this both if you're trying to lose weight or if you're trying to gain weight. So we don't want you to skip meals if you're trying to gain weight or maintain your weight. We don't want you to avoid eating or skip meals if you're trying to lose weight, because then you might get so hungry at the next meal that you overeat. Stock up on healthy snack items. Have those around. So veggies and hummus, fruit, nuts, lower sugar protein bars. That way you're not going to grab junk food when you do get hungry. Oops. Sorry. I have different slides. Consider grocery store delivery. So I've got a 4-month-old at home, and for like the first 2 months, I did not go do any grocery shopping because I did not want to try and get me and him ready to get out of the house. So it was amazing. I used the Amazon Now one, so it was free, but they deliver it. It comes right to your door. But there's a number of companies that do that. So it was Walmart has it, King Soopers has it, Safeway, Albertsons, Amazon, Instacart, Envoy. If it's tough for you to get out of the house and go get your groceries, or if it's just one more thing on your to-do list, can be a great way to kind of outsource that. Some of those too also have drive-up options, so you can drive up and they'll bring the stuff out to your car. Let other people help. So they can help with shopping, they can help with preparation, they can help with cleanup. If you don't feel comfortable asking for help, think about having a family member or a close friend set up a meal train for you. That way you don't have to individually ask people, hey, can you bring me a meal? If somebody else does it, that's kind of an easy way for people to go, okay, hey, here's a way I can help. And so there's a meal train is one online option. There's a couple other similar ones as well. And then look into resources that can provide food for you, and I'm going to go into this a little bit later. I've got some options to look into if that's really something that you need help with. Keep your freezer and pantry stocked with healthy foods. If you keep your freezer and pantry stocked, then you have healthy foods around, so you're not running to the drive-thru or something like that. So pre-cut washed veggies, frozen veggies, no salt added canned beans, canned tuna, unsalted nuts and nut butters, whole grain cereal, yogurt, oats, those unseasoned rotisserie chickens, frozen fruit, Those can be some good, quick options to have around the house. If you're trying to cook when you are fatigued, I recommend getting either a tall stool so you can kind of do all your prep work while sitting, or just moving your prep work to the kitchen table and sitting down on a chair. That way you don't have to be standing the whole time you're doing all your cooking prep. Think about making bigger batches of food and freezing some. So this way you kind of do the work once and then eat twice. So that can be a good option. Some foods like soups can freeze pretty well if you're making those ahead of time. Other ones like meat or chicken, sometimes you can prep a marinade and then get it all ready and throw half in the fridge just to cook when you're ready, or freezer to cook when you're ready. And then be prepared for what you need. We all have to get quicker food options sometimes, so know some healthier takeout places near your home, have some healthier frozen dinners that you know you can go to in a pinch, have some of those better options so that you're not going to McDonald's and getting the Big Mac. This is part where I want you guys to be a little more active. So this is kind of a little bit of a game. So it's myth or truth. So I think we all have heard a variety of things that may come across as old wives' tales or things like that. So there's some interesting things that are true and some that I think people think are true and may not be. So what I want to do is have you guys all kind of go, who thinks it's true and who thinks it's a myth? You guys can raise your hands, and then I'll give you kind of what I found in my research. So first one is I should avoid milk because it will increase my mucus production. So who thinks this is true? Okay, and then who thinks this is false? Okay, so this one is actually a myth. So studies have shown that drinking cow's milk does not cause an excess or increase in mucus. And these studies, I thought this was interesting, actually included measurements of nasal secretions. So for anybody who thinks they have a tough job out there, that one sounds worse. The sensation of increased mucus after drinking milk may be due to the fat content of milk coating your mouth and throat. It may also be to some of the proteins in milk binding with proteins in your saliva. But you don't need to avoid milk unless you have a lactose intolerance or a milk allergy. But one tip that I wanted to add to this is if you do have issues with excess mucus, drinking plenty of fluids, drinking plenty of water can help thin those secretions, can also help prevent your mucous membranes from getting dry and irritated. The next one, studies have shown that there we go. I missed one of the slides, I apologize. I should avoid carbohydrates because I have COPD and this will worsen my breathing. So who thinks I should avoid carbohydrates? This is true. Okay. Who thinks this is false? More people. Okay. So it's actually a little bit of both. Carbon dioxide retention is a problem in COPD. That carbon dioxide retention leads to faster breathing and that feeling of shortness of breath. We do know that the process of metabolizing carbohydrates actually produces more carbon dioxide retention than fat or protein. However, studies have shown that it's more in excess of calories than it is carbohydrates that truly cause carbon dioxide retention. So carbohydrate foods, whole grains, starchy veggies, fruit, are still part of a healthy diet for people with lung disease. I will add, though, for some people with COPD, eating fewer carbohydrates and a little bit more fat can potentially help them breathe easier. But my recommendation is kind of if you want to start on that, eliminate the refined carbohydrates, eliminate the added sugars. That would be a good place to start that doesn't eliminate healthy food groups. Sorry, I had sent her the other slides too, so I forget that I have my answers up there. Okay, myth or truth? Treating my reflux can improve my pulmonary condition. So who thinks this is truth? Okay, who thinks this is a myth? Okay, you guys got it right. Most people answered truth. So it is a truth. Reflux can contribute to airway obstruction and bronchoconstriction, and it does this through a few mechanisms. So increased vagal tone, heightened bronchial reactivity, and then microaspiration of gastric contents into the upper airway. So little bits of food from your reflux getting into your lungs. Aggressive anti-reflux therapy can improve asthma symptoms and pulmonary function test. And what they found was treatment with medications can improve asthma symptoms or unexplained chronic cough. And then in pulmonary fibrosis, reflux management, and medical treatment has actually been associated with improved survival time. So absolutely, if you have unexplained chronic cough, if you have asthma, if you have pulmonary fibrosis, or if you have known reflux, make sure it's under control, talk to your doctor, get medications to treat it as needed. Oh, I just gave away my favorite one. Let's see. There we go. Hopefully you guys get this right. Chicken soup is actually helpful when I have a cold. Who thinks this is the truth? Anybody who's just looking at my slides? I think this one's really cool because I think this is one of those things that, you know, grandma makes chicken noodle soup and mom makes chicken noodle soup. It's actually beneficial. So chicken soup can have a mild anti-inflammatory effect that can relieve cold symptoms. It also contains a compound called carnosine that can help prevent the development of the common cold. It's also been found to be superior to hot water in increasing the movement of nasal mucus, clearing the airways, and easing congestion. And then chicken soup can also improve the ability of cilia, the little tiny hairline projections in the nose, it helps them prevent infectious particles from affecting the body. So I think that's really cool. So yes, if you're sick or if you feel like you might be getting sick, go to the chicken soup. Okay, myth or truth? I should supplement with vitamin D. Truth. Okay, myth. Okay, so I think you guys got this right. I say possibly a truth, but ask your provider. Vitamin D may be helpful in pulmonary disease. It has a lot of complex effects. So it can affect your lungs, your immune system, your ability to heal. It can potentially provide better lung function, less airway hyperresponsiveness, and improved glucocorticoid response. Vitamin D can also boost immune system responses and reduce airway inflammation. It can also help reduce myopathy and muscle weakness. Vitamin D deficiency, so people who are deficient, it's been related to early progression of COPD as well as to increased risk for asthma attacks. And vitamin D supplements may have protective effects for those with asthma, including reduced rates of exacerbations needing treatment with corticosteroids. So those are kind of the benefits. There is some disagreement on how beneficial vitamin D supplements are. So there was a study that found that while it improved oxygen uptake and it improved muscle strength, it didn't improve a 6-minute walk test. So still kind of not completely defined. But I think it's reasonable if you'd want to supplement vitamin D. I would recommend talking to your provider about this since it's kind of an individual decision. It's not an across the board, yes, everybody needs it. So talk to your provider, consider getting a vitamin D level checked before you start supplementation and then on an ongoing basis just to make sure that your supplementation is appropriate. Next one. Antioxidants can help with COPD. So who thinks this is a truth? You? Who thinks this is a myth? Nobody really answered that one. So I like to say truth, but let me explain. So the consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables, so antioxidant-rich foods, is positively associated with pulmonary function, fewer symptoms, and possibly reduced oxidative stress. So fruits and veggies. However, research is not sufficient to conclude that antioxidant therapy, such as supplements, can slow COPD's rate of progression. So it goes back to what I was saying earlier, eat an overall healthy diet. That's going to include fruits and veggies. Supplements don't seem to do the same thing. There was a great quote that I heard once that said, it's the carrot, not the carotene. So get your fruits and veggies in. Okay, I think this is the last myth or truth. So constipation can worsen my breathing. Who thinks this is a myth? You? Who thinks this is the truth? More people. You guys are right. So constipation can cause bloating and pressure in the space below the diaphragm. So this can prevent the diaphragm from moving as far down as normal. You can prevent constipation by getting enough high fiber foods, so all those healthy foods, veggies, fruits, whole grains, nuts, seeds, beans. But the other key is getting enough water. If you eat a lot of fiber and not enough water, you're still going to have problems. And I do like to mention other foods. Other foods that can potentially cause bloating are going to be Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cabbage, onions, carbonated beverages. So if you are having any problems with bloating, making it more difficult to breathe, watch out for those foods. And then if you do have lactose intolerance, watching out for foods that would contain lactose, that can also cause bloating. So I know I said I would mention some resources for nutritious meals. There are some really awesome ones out there. I'm sending people referrals for some of these all the time. Project Angel Heart is great. They are located in the Denver area, and what they do is they provide participants meals. It kind of varies depending on kind of what level you fall in, but it's 5 meals a week, usually frozen. Some people qualify for hot meals or things like that, though. They have input from a chef and a registered dietitian, and you qualify. It's not income-based, so I do like to clarify that because sometimes I bring it up to people and they're like, no, I can afford food. It's not about that. It's about your diagnosis and whether or not you're able to eat healthy food. So if you're living with a current diagnosis of a life-threatening illness, and they do, COPD is one of theirs, they have a laundry list of diagnoses, though, so there's plenty of other ones on there. If you have documented difficulty preparing or accessing healthy meals, so that might be financial, that might be shortness of breath, that might be fatigue, things that are preventing you from being able to make healthy meals. And you do have to live within the Metro Denver area, so the kind of the bigger Metro Denver area, though, the E470, C470 Giant Loop. Or in Colorado Springs, they have a location as well. If you don't live within that area, you can still get meals if you're willing to go to their location and pick them up, and they're right around the where I-25 and I-70 meet, kind of in North Denver. 4950 Washington Street. Or if you have a friend or family member who's willing to accept the meals for you, keep them refrigerated or frozen until you can come pick them up. So that's a really great resource. Meals on Wheels is another one. They also provide 5 meals each week, either hot or frozen, depending on people's needs. To qualify for this, you have to be age 60 or older, and you do have to be homebound to qualify. Next one is the VOA Congregate Dining Centers. I kind of think of these as Meals on Wheels if you can drive to it yourself. So it's still the hot meals prepared that day. There's a number of centers in the Denver area. They do ask for a $2.50 donation per meal, but if you cannot afford it, they will not deny you a meal. And the only qualification for that is 60 years of age or older. And then the last one up here is the Hunger Free Colorado hotline. So it's a phone number. I think they have an email, or not an email, a website as well. And what they do is they basically connect Coloradans to those resources for food, for meals. So they're bilingual, they speak English, they speak Spanish, and they can direct people to federal assistance programs, to other charitable programs, and if you need to apply for food stamps, they can help with that as well. So if you're struggling with any of that, they're a great resource. That is mostly all I had for you, except that Edna Fiore caught me before my talk and said that the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics just put out new guidelines for nutrition and COPD. So there is some more new up-to-date information in there. So if you need info on that, talk to Edna, or now I can access it too on their website. But I guess they just came out recently. So thank you so much for letting me come and chat with you. Milk substitutes. So just kind of overall, are they healthy? Is that the question? Okay. So milk substitutes, a lot of them end up being lower in protein. So whereas milk gives you usually 8 grams of protein per cup, milk substitutes are going to vary. So some of them are lower in protein. So if that's like your usual source of protein at breakfast is your glass of milk, be cautious. Make sure you're getting another source of protein if you're switching to a milk substitute. The other thing is milk substitutes vary. Some of them are the unsweetened, minimal added sugar. So those are perfectly healthy. Some of them are loaded with sugar. So it's going to vary from one to the other. So if you're choosing a unsweetened, almond milk, totally fine. Just make sure you're getting an extra source of protein in at that meal. That answer your question? Okay. So the question is, I find that most whole grains are ground for flour in bread, pasta, etc. Are bread and pasta considered whole grains? So basic answer is yes, but you need to make sure it's 100% whole grains. With bread, wheat bread doesn't necessarily mean 100% whole wheat bread. So we want to make sure that it's 100%, whether it's wheat or another grain. But yeah, same thing with pasta. There's some cool lentil pastas out there now that I've tried as well. The other thing for pasta that I recommend is you can get this little $7 tool called a spiralizer, and you just put a zucchini through it, and then you can have zucchini as pasta. So not only are you not getting refined white pasta, but you're getting a veggie. But yes, the answer to that is yes, as long as they're 100% whole grain. The key to that is it's got all the same components as what was in it in nature. Are corn and potatoes considered whole grains? So those are starchy vegetables. So I kind of put them, I'm going to flip back through this. Whoops. No, I'm not. Sorry. That plate that I showed you, where a quarter of your plate is whole grains and starchy veggies, so I kind of put them in the same category, but no, they're starchy vegetables, so kind of yes and no, but no, they're not grains. Our serving sizes for whole grains, nuts, and seeds. Okay, so nuts and seeds is going to be golf ball size portion, so keeping that pretty limited. For whole grains, it's going to vary since there's so many different whole grain foods, but like a piece of bread is generally considered a serving of whole grains. A half cup of like a cooked oatmeal or something like that would be considered a serving. In general, the way we think of it is something that's going to give you about 15 grams of carbohydrate, but those are kind of the examples. Eat all food for the day in 8 hours instead of every 4 hours. So there's some interesting research going on now about intermittent fasting. My caution is if you are losing weight, this would definitely not be appropriate for you because then you're eating less often, and as we talked about, skipped meals are a risk factor for malnutrition. But they are finding some interesting research in this area, so I think for some people it might be appropriate, definitely not if you're losing weight. The other people it would definitely not be appropriate for is if you have diabetes and you're on medications, because then you can have insulin causing blood sugar drops. We don't want you to go hypoglycemic because that's dangerous. But yeah, I think if you don't have either of those issues, it can potentially be beneficial, but I'd be kind of cautious since there's other things that we want to prevent more so. Is healthy weight variable for age, menopause, other? I do, so overall that's the recommendations that I showed you are kind of what we recommend. I know I worked with a dietitian once and I love the way she worded it. She says, we tend to soften as we age. So I do think there is that ongoing weight gain as we age, but it's not necessarily healthful. So trying to fight against that, maintain muscle mass is going to be beneficial. Yeah. Planning with health plate, where is the meat, poultry? So that was that quarter of the plate that's your protein foods. So that's your eggs, meat, like lean meat, poultry, those products. So sorry, I can't pull it up again. But in that plate, that was a quarter of your plate is the meat and poultry. So those are protein foods. So those are the ones that are important to make sure you're meeting your protein needs, that your lungs are able to fight infections. Yeah. It's both. So I changed it. So here it's just spelled wrong, but it was Pren. Now it's Sullivan. So yes, but I just changed it recently. So I'm like, I think when we were planning all of this, it was still Pren. So I apologize. Actually, both. So if you guys have questions, my email address is holly. And it's either Pren or Sullivan. They both get you to me. At uchealth.org. So if you guys have other questions that come up after this, feel free to reach out. I should have put that on there. No salt limit. Hang on, I'm going to try and read this first. Okay, so no salt limit, 1,200 milligrams. Is there a list or a place where you can find like salt, lower salt foods, milk, breads, etc.? I would actually say talk to your doctor. 1,200 milligrams is actually a very low amount. Usually if a doctor puts somebody on a sodium-restricted diet for something like pulmonary hypertension or heart failure, it's 2,000 milligrams. So first of all, make sure you're following the right number on that, because I don't want you to have too restrictive of a diet. I think when you get too restrictive, it can be tough to actually just meet your nutrition needs. And is there a list that you can find? I don't have a list, but the way that I like to think about kind of sodium-restricted foods is kind of two sides of the spectrum. So on one side is your foods that are close to nature, so fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, meat that hasn't been processed, that sort of thing. Those are your low-sodium foods. Basically, the more people mess with foods, the more we process them, the higher in sodium they're going to be. So bread usually does have some salt because it helps the yeast not cause the bread to overrise, so there is usually going to be some in there. Milk, there's not necessarily, I don't think milk usually has sodium added, but any animal product is going to have some amount of salt in there. It would still fit within a low salt diet though. But yeah, I think just overall choosing more fresh, close to their natural state foods and less processed, sauce added. And then, way over on that side is the fast food and restaurant food. So trying to cook more at home is going to be helpful. Yeah. Other questions for me? Anne?
I'm not a veggie person. Do vitamins help?
So if you're absolutely not going to eat your veggies and there's nothing I can do to talk you into that, it might be beneficial to take a multivitamin, but you're not. I think, in a way, the cool thing about food is we don't know all the stuff that's in there. There's still things that we can't, we haven't deduced it down to, okay, we can just break this carrot down and you take a pill and then you don't have to eat the carrot. So I think if you're not eating the veggies, yes, take a multivitamin, but better option is eat those veggies.
I know that's what you do. I do eat green beans.
Okay, that counts. Any other questions? Cool. Thank you guys for having me here today.
Believe in yourself. You are braver than you think, more talented than you know, and capable of more than you can imagine. So now you're going to sit, put your head up, what we call sniff position. That means bring that chin up like you're walking into a bakery and take a nice breath. You can't eat the bakery foods, but you can smell them. Okay? So, sniff position opens up the airway to the lungs. Every time you have your chin down, you're cutting off your airway to breathe. So especially if you're leaning and looking, you breathe very shallow. So think about that once in a while. How are you actually breathing? Bring it up in the sniff position, okay?